Two big Bitcoin experts come in to testify in Copa v. Wright, day 18. Does Copa begin to regain ground in this case, or does Dr. Craig Wright remain ahead? Find out to the end, and we'll break the whole day down. All right, so yesterday we had a couple of, basically this week, kind of to summarize, we had a couple of big all-star witnesses for Copa that came forward and both floundered, humbly speaking. Yeah, the big all-star witness, they had Mr. Madden. Now, I want to present this so that I could kind of frame what's going on with the witnesses for today. So first we had Mr. Madden. Now, his objective was to discredit Wright and to the, potentially he was supposed to be neutral. And really that came into question. Some of his qualifications came into question, and what he admitted that he didn't write the report. That came out in examination, and that's big. That's majorly problematic. It's a 1,000-page report. It's going to be hard for the court to get over that. And not only did he not write it, it would have been okay had he not written the report if it was his own private staff. However, he admitted that a particular person over at Bird and Bird for Copa, Mr. Tristan, did most of the writing of the report. Now, he had some things, I kind of instructed him and I gave him some key points, but I didn't write it, so that's problematic. I see that that particular report is going to be very difficult. Now, some clarity on Rosenthal. Hearing on one of the Twitter spaces, and shout out to the guys doing the Twitter spaces, man. I mean, I freaking love you guys. It's just freaking so valuable that you're doing it, and hats off to Zach and the other guys who are putting it together, Jerry. So, Bose, One Love. And here's one of the things that is brought up, and it is in the Rosenthal report, it contradicts Wright 4. Wright 4 was prior to this. Now, I think this is a point that needs to be clarified. The Rosenthal report was introduced after Wright 11. So for those who are caught up on Wright 4, strike that, go back into Wright 11, go back into the court's order in December, and you can analyze, okay, what happened here where the court granted the new evidence to come in from Dr. Wright about the latex file on Wright 11, and then correlate the Rosenthal report to that. Because it doesn't make any sense by talking about the Rosenthal report with Wright 4, okay? And that was discussed in the spaces. It was, anyways, yeah, I would highly recommend taking a closer look at that if you guys want to break it down further, because it's all about Wright 11, not Wright 4. That being said, just to summarize on Rosenthal from yesterday, where we were at, Rosenthal, he was a highly qualified expert. However, he admitted that he failed to perform a complete analysis as to how the white paper was written. So there's two separate ways that Wright had alleged to have written it between Windows and Linux, and then using the latex file format. Mr. Rosenthal admitted that it was just easier for him to use one way and not the other. So he didn't do both. So that his own testimony makes that report incomplete, in my opinion. I think the court's going to find the same thing. So just today, we had a couple big blockbuster Bitcoin expert witnesses. Now, I'm going to frame this. We got one was he brought in for Dr. Wright. His name was Zem Gao. And then the other one was Professor Meiklejohn. This is the Copa expert witness they call her an expert in cryptocurrency. So in opening, Mr. Gao, he struck his paragraph 326 from his witness statement, which referenced some hex dumps. He went over procedures of signing public blocks and private Bitcoin keys. And Dr. Wright, he also addressed the question that Dr. Wright in his own testimony alleged he wasn't an expert. And what Gao claimed is that he's an expert in the Bitcoin blockchain, not in cryptography. So he made the allegation or the comparison like a race car driver is an expert race car driver. However, he's not an expert at building the car. All right, so it was a good little analogy there in reference to his expertise is not in building Bitcoin or cryptography, but in actually applying it. So Jonathan Hough for Copa also reviewed facts of the prior testimony of Gavin Andresen and John Matonis Bitcoin signings. And so we kind of broke those things down. Now, I will bring up, both sides of the perspective here for potentially for the argument. So Mr. Gao, he was questioned about his independence. All right. And this was the main problem, I'd say, where Copa was trying to attack him on. Now, I think it's first of all, important to look at this two sides. He brings up articles. So Mr. Jonathan Hough brings up articles that Zem Gao had written in his own personal blog and his own personal book about how he interpreted facts about Bitcoin and about Craig Wright in his own independent investigation. That's separate from his expert report. Big, huge difference. We've got his expert report, his own personal things that he's doing. Now, that's important because there was zero contention or even question by Jonathan Hough from Copa about Mr. Zem Gao's bias or his incomplete report or his one-sided opinions or actually a specific objective that he was trying to lead the court to with his report. None of that was questioned. So presuming on the face that the report that Zem Gao wrote as an expert was completely 100% neutral. All right? That's the presumption because it wasn't even questioned. Now, what was questioned was his own personal blog, what he was doing in his free time, in his spare time, what he was independently investigating Dr. Wright and had for years and years and years. And so one of the things he was questioned about was, well, is it appropriate that you had written this blog post earlier this year when you already knew you were going to be a witness? He says, yeah, absolutely. And I think that people are going to disagree on this, but there's a big difference between what someone does in their free time versus what they write in their expert report before the court. All right. That's a big difference. Now, if the report is written one way to say, well, I believe this and I believe all these things and the court should find that Dr. Wright Satoshi. Well, that's different. That's not what he wrote. And that's not at all what he was questioned about. So I want to actually give him credit for, in that point and kind of like point out both sides of the argument. Copa says he's potentially biased because of what he wrote in a blog post, which was technically not before the court. Well, strike that. It actually is now before the court because he admitted to writing it. Okay, so it is before the court. However, it wasn't in his report about this case. Now, Mr. Gao did testify to his independence. He said he was 100% independent, and he used the analogy in his blog post that he had done a review of Dr. Wright and this material in something called the Bayesian theory, and it's one to where he has done a complete analysis, of something, and then made a determination of what he believes. And he also stated that. About the signings, the Matonis and the John and Gavin Andresen signings, because he made a post in his blog post. He believes that Dr. Wright Satoshi Nakamoto. And he said that, however, that signing in one of the posts does not prove identity. And he elaborated on this, and he believes that in his own legal expertise as an attorney, that, one must first prove the legal identity to the court. Otherwise, signings of signatures and private keys are completely irrelevant. Yeah, so, I mean, it's definitely Zem Gao's, I wouldn't say they're going to strike. I would say this is going to be a win for Dr. Wright. He's definitely going to help, help push Dr. Wright. He could push the cards forward here before we go to the next witness, only because of the fact that his report was not questioned in any way to have been biased or one-sided. They brought up his blog posts. And he completely admitted that he had done a finding of fact on those, and it was on a specific method. So I'm going to have to, I don't see the court striking him as an unqualified or biased expert. Professor Meiklejohn is sworn. She was next. And I want to kind of run a comparison between the two. So she was questioned by Mr. Orr for Dr. Wright about the 2016 signing sessions and on the journalists and about if downloading the blockchain is sufficient to do the signing. And she says, yes, it is. There was some contention on why Dr. Wright downloaded the blockchain and how that was supposed to be to subvert the actual journalist from reviewing the signing. And she testified that it would work, but it was more difficult. It would take long. She then was questioned about Gavin Andresen signing, and where Andresen testified that a brand new laptop was procured by an assistant, and it was unpacked and booted in front of me. That's what Gavin Andresen said. Now, Mr. Orr, he questioned Professor Meiklejohn's report about not being objective, her actual report, stating, hey, why did you leave out this particular very important sentence by Gavin Andresen where he's saying that he witnessed a brand new laptop procured in front of him that was unpacked and booted right in front of me? And he said, you only brought up the part that was to discredit Dr. Wright. So regarding the foul play of the signing, Professor Meiklejohn also admitted that Gavin Andresen is a highly qualified expert in signing sessions, and in fact that it is possible that he's the most qualified Bitcoin expert in the world at that time. She claims that Andresen did not follow basic steps, in her opinion, to determine if the signing session was genuine. And then Mr. Orr alluded to her type of to this type of subversion was highly unusual, and she denies. One of the key questions here that came up is that, Mr. Orr alleged that, it looks like, according to your report, you have a desired outcome here to discredit Dr. Wright. She denies. Now, this is different from Zem Gao because, again, the report from Zem Gao was not questioned as to though he had a desired outcome in it. Why? Because accordingly, it apparently was written from a very neutral perspective and also a very a fact-finding perspective. So being an attorney and probably a prolific writer, he has the knowledge and ability to write his report to where it's just neutral and he's evaluating all the facts. And that was pointed out today with Professor Meiklejohn, that she was only taking certain facts from the Gavin Andresen testimony and these other reports from Dr. Wright, from the Wright 11, about how, well, these are the facts, and she was leaving others out. And she says, well, I just forgot to put that in. Well, it appeared that Mr. Orr was making the case that she had a very one-sided opinion. In fact, he asked her, said, she actually stated that what she outlined in her report is not what I'm suggesting happened at the signing session. And so Orr asked her, so why is it in the report then? Because she'd gone into excruciating detail to elaborate other articles from 2022 and 2017 of attacks on government networks. Well, potentially she didn't quite admit that they were just government networks, but it was on these very high-level attacks, on networks. But then she says, what I outlined in my report I wasn't suggesting it happened in the signing. So at that point, Mr. Orr looked at the court and he's like, well, why did you put it in there? And then she went into a long explanation and didn't really answer the question. Mr. Gunning, Mr. Orr rested after that and then gave it back to Mr. Gunning. Mr. Gunning for BTC Core came up and he attempted to bring in new evidence on reexamination from a report that Dr. Wright had written in the past, which was not before the court at the specific time. This right there caused a high drama moment in the court where Mr. Orr gets up, even Lord Gavin, who commented, and started raising loud, boisterous objections and stopping Mr. Gunning. They went back and forth. The court allowed him to ask the question and direct what the question was. They have strongly objected again, and then at that point, the court sustained and did not allow Professor Meiklejohn to answer the question. So nothing new was added by Gunning at that point, even though it could have been potentially considered redirect because it was about a specific point that it was highly impossible, almost highly unlikely for Wright to be able to create a forged environment to do this, or hack the environment to create to screw up the signing with Gavin Andresen, or to tamper with it. So I'd say this definitely goes to Wright. Absolutely goes to Wright. I don't see the court striking Zem Gao. And, Professor Meiklejohn, because it's in her own report, and people are going to say, oh, you're being biased. I'm not. Professor Meiklejohn's report itself appears to be one-sided, and Zem Gao's was not questioned at all, his own report about being one-sided. It definitely goes to Wright. 10 for Wright, 7 for Copa. Wright gains ground. Copa falls behind. Next up, we got Wright on the stand on Friday morning. I'll be putting something out on that. And then tomorrow there's no court. So I have something else I'm going to be doing I'm doing an interview with Connor Murray later today. We're going to be discussing some things. Like, comment, subscribe, baby. This is Gavin Mehl. I'll see you at the top.